I'd like to welcome you all to the Interaction of Processes and its Importance to a Successful Audit webinar. My name is Joseph Krolikowski and I am the Technical Director of Perry Johnson Registrars. A couple of notes for everyone. All of our participants are on mute, but we absolutely want to take your questions, so please utilize the question portion of the dashboard. We will address your questions at the conclusion of our presentation. I'll also note for you that copies of our presentation will be available for download shortly after we're finished. And this webinar and all other past PJR webinars are also available for reviewing on our website under previously recorded webinars. Our topics for today, we're going to go over the background of this requirement. We're going to explore where the requirements for processes come from, both in the 2008 and 2015 versions of ISO 9001. We'll take a look at the how to define a process, both in terms of how it's officially defined and also the correct way to understand it. We'll also have some ideas, some thoughts on what is not a process. And we've got an extensive section with some strategies on meeting this requirement and if this is attractive to you, meeting it with minimal changes to your existing documentation. Going back to 2014, PJR, as you I'm sure are well aware, we are an accredited registrar, accredited by several of the accreditation bodies, and we were compelled, you might say, in 2014 to start to take a harder line on our assessments of client interaction of processes, or IOP, documents. And this was rooted in a requirement from ISO 17021. Now at that time that document was in its 2011 revision. It has since been updated in 2015. And both versions of that standard include a clause that reads as follows. An audit program for the full certification cycle, that's the 3-year period, shall be developed to clearly identify the audit activity or activities required to demonstrate that the client's management system fulfills the requirements for certification. Now the emphasis that we were given back in 2014 was that we needed to be sure that our auditors were performing and documenting their audits in such a way that they reflect you, our client, your management system. And that makes sense, after all. Your system is supposed to be a reflection of who you are as an organization, and it wouldn't make sense for us to audit anything but who you are. So this requirement became much more pronounced at that time. Now, we strive to make this work with the interaction of processes document that we're given. Our policy, as compelled by ISO 17021, is to adhere to what we're given as the IOP, and only to what we're given as the IOP. Now, if the IOP itself is deficient, if it does not do an effective job of identifying what the processes are, our job of auditing your management system and showing that in the audit report becomes very difficult. So accordingly, we instructed our auditors that if you are performing an audit and you encounter an IOP that does not do an effective job of identifying what the processes are, you have to issue a nonconformance to compel the right kind of change. Now in terms of where the requirement comes from in the first place, to know what your processes are. This is a theme that goes back to the 2000 version of ISO 9001, when the focus shifted from elements to processes, and process-based auditing became the order of the day. In ISO 9001-2008, the 3 primary clauses are as follows. In 4.1a, it states that the organization shall determine the processes needed for the quality management system and their application throughout the organization. The organization shall also, in 4.1b, determine the sequence and interaction of these processes. And then in 4.2.2, which is of course the requirement pertaining to a quality manual, the organization shall establish and maintain a quality manual that includes a description of the interaction between the processes of the quality management system. Now, if we shift our focus to ISO 9001-2015, the first two requirements are virtually the same. All of these requirements are rooted in section 4.4. 4.4.1 says that the organization shall determine processes needed for the quality management system. In subclause B, it says you will determine the sequence and interaction of those processes. And then in 4.4.2, we're given a slightly different rendering of the requirement, and it states that you shall maintain documented information to support the operation of its processes. Now, the interpretation of what that means is taken that you still have to have that interaction of processes. You still have to define what are my processes, what are the processes that make up my system. Now, in terms of understanding what is a process, it's best if we start with the textbook definition, so to speak. Most of the official definitions that we use in ISO 9001 come from the 9000 standard, which is, of course, fundamentals and vocabulary. 9000 defines process as follows. It is a set of interrelated or interacting activities that use inputs to deliver an intended result, or outputs. Now, the key aspect of that definition is interrelated or interacting activities. What this puts across is that a process is not a single step. It's a series of activities, a series of steps that are focused on a shared goal. And that's key. Bear that particular point in mind as we keep moving here. Now, obviously, for a lot of companies, there's going to be a significant amount of processes that you end up seeing the same processes in multiple companies. So what I did on this slide here was I put together what are some of the more common processes that we see. Sales, purchasing, production, shipping, design, production control. These are process names that we see over and over again in organizations. And this is very much how do you understand your system? What are the processes that you understand your system is made up of? That's what we want to see reflected on your IOP. It needs to be as personal as possible. It needs to reflect who you are. Now, if your system is made up of 4 processes, and say those 4 processes are sales, purchasing, production, support, it's absolutely acceptable for your IOP to reflect as much. So long as the applicable requirements of the standard fall under those 4 processes, that's absolutely fine. Now, in terms of what is not a process, now I've already kind of tipped my hand on this, but generally an IOP document is going to be rejected if it shows steps within a single process, or if it's a long flow of multiple steps without any processes being called out. So what do we mean when we say steps? I've got some examples here. If you have an IOP and it's got 5 pieces on it: create work order, issue production schedule, complete work order, package product, ship product. In that scenario, it's entirely conceivable that all 5 of those steps are part of a single process. But in all likelihood, they are not processes by themselves. When we receive an interaction of processes document that shows these types of things as processes, again, we're instructing our auditors to issue nonconformances and say, look, what you have here are process steps, not processes. Now, we want to try to help you develop an effective strategy for this. First of all, we know that for a lot of you, your IOP is a tenured document. It's an item that a lot of careful thought went into. It was most likely a collaborative effort, and it's something that you've had for a long time. Some of you have been certified as far back as the 2000 version of ISO 9001, and you've had the same IOP for all of that time. So to now be told that it is suddenly unacceptable, we absolutely understand that that's disconcerting. So we want to share with you some strategies on what you might consider to kind of keep the core of what you had, but to make it work for you in a more effective way. So what we're going to do is, over the next couple of slides, we're going to look at a sample of an IOP, and we're going to improve it in two key ways. We're going to start by reviewing the raw IOP. Now please note, this particular example is not reflective of any particular PJR client. It was created solely for the purpose of this presentation. Okay, here's our raw IOP. Now, as you can see, there are 12 boxes on here and 2 decision diamonds. Now, are we to presume that this organization has 12 individual processes with inputs and outputs and measures of effectiveness and process leads and things of this nature? And what about some of these other items on here? Prioritize work orders at the production meeting. Is that a process? Order entered in the mainframe system. Is that a process? Rejected product disposition meetings. Is that a process? So you can see here that what we've got really is a series of process steps. These are not processes. If we see an IOP like this in the context of an audit, this is something that should be discussed, concerns raised, and if necessary, a nonconformance issued. Now, our first improvement that we're going to make is we're going to identify the support processes. Now, let's jump back for a second. If we look at this IOP and say, okay, the first step appears to be customer order received. The back end step is shipping. So all of what we've got here are the core activities, right? The ordering and the production areas and things of this nature. But there's more to a quality system than that. There's all of the things that are occurring in the background that support what happens in this main process here. So we'll go back now and talk about this idea of support processes. Now, first of all, ISO 9000 and ISO 9001, neither one of them draw any particular distinction between classifying processes. But we do absolutely see key and core processes as a concept. We see that fairly often. Now, when that happens, sometimes the items that are characterized as support or management, they get left off the IOP, whether intentionally or accidentally. So what are some of the things we're referring to as support processes? Well, things like management review, things like internal auditing, training, monitoring of customer satisfaction information, your objectives, and so forth. Those items are still absolutely a part of your quality system, but they're not part of the day-to-day flow, so to speak. So how do we get that into an IOP? Well, here's an example of how you might do that. Okay, so here's the raw IOP again. But as you can see, we have now this support box in the lower right-hand corner. And you'll note the disconnected arrows here. what is this intended to signify? This is intended to signify, okay, we have a set of support processes that support the rest of what's going on here, the core activities, right? These are support processes that work to support the main activities of this organization. Okay. Now the other improvement that we're going to do is we're going to create an IOP key. Now, this is absolutely the most popular strategy we've seen and accepted for an organization that wants to keep their IOP as written, but still do what they're required to do and identify the processes. So how can this be done? Well, numbering is used, alpha characters are used. For our test model, I used color coding. Okay. So now we have, in the lower left-hand portion of the screen here, we've got 6 processes identified. And here in orange, we have sales order entry. Purchasing is these items in green. Production, these 3 yellow items. They have what they refer to as a quality process in red. And then 2 boxes that they're referring to as shipping and support. So now we have the IOP exactly the way it was rendered before, but we've accomplished 2 things here. We've made 2 adjustments, and now we know what the processes are, and we also have an appropriate reflection of support processes. This is an IOP that is now ready for audit assessment. Now, we recognize that there's a lot of ways to go about this. There's a lot of ways to identify what the processes are and how they interact with each other. So we thought that you might find it beneficial to see some additional examples of how other organizations have done this. In all cases, these are real-world examples, and permission was granted from the organization for the example to be used. Okay, here we go. This particular item, as you can see, it's got kind of a top-to-bottom flow. There are 7 core processes that are called out. We have our support processes off to the side, and the general idea here is that this is kind of a singular flow. Top to bottom, top to bottom, top to bottom. Here's a slightly busier example. Now, what I have this one included for is you'll note kind of the unique names that are used for these processes. Not everyone has an overhaul process. Not everyone has what they would refer to as an inventory management process. And you'll also note how this map really goes to some aggressive lengths to show not just the top to bottom flow of the interactions, but the shared interactions. The idea that the overhaul process interfaces with quote, and the inventory management process interfaces with work order / receiving inspection, and so forth. This particular model that we're looking at now is commonly referred to as the swim lane approach. And our processes are named here in the margin: sales, purchasing, production, and support. And the idea here is that sales and purchasing, at least in terms of what triggers them, they start off as independent processes. Sales is not dependent on purchasing to start, and purchasing is not dependent on sales to start. But they do kind of meet up in the middle, so to speak, here, with purchased items being received, and that sort of enabling the issuance of work orders. Those 2 items then in turn kind of meet down here on production, where we start with injection molding. And then injection molding takes us all the way through to the last step, which is shipping. And then once again, of course, we see our support processes down here kind of lending support to the larger picture here. Here's one additional model. This particular organization chose to use highlighting to call out their 5 core processes. They have sales order entry, purchasing, and then 3 kind of production type processes. And again, you'll note the unique names that are used here: service exchange, repair and return. These are not your run-of-the-mill process designations. They've also got this kind of disclaimer box here that tells us that anything that isn't highlighted is considered support. So in this case, our auditor's report would have commentary on 6 processes, these 5 plus support. So in conclusion, we want to provide you with a value-added audit, and we want to meet applicable requirements. And it's imperative for your audit to really have maximum value. Your audit has to be rooted in who you are as an organization, and it has to be rooted in what are your processes. So this is very much why this is being pushed as such an important requirement. So it is my hope that the points of this presentation will help you develop an even better understanding of what your processes are and be that much better prepared for audit assessment. I do thank you for your time. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and unlock the question portion of the dashboard. We'll see if we have any questions. We have a question from Tom Berenson. What is IOP? Tom, my apologies. IOP refers to interaction of processes. Are there any other questions? Okay, Josie Bautista asks, 7.6 is part of Section 7. Why then is 7.6 shown as a support process and not part of the manufacturing process? Great question, Josie. Well, first of all, remember that the audits that we do now are not clause-based, and you know, we have to kind of build our audits around what are the organization's processes. So 7.6, for those who don't know, that is the monitoring and measuring equipment or monitoring and measuring devices clause in ISO 9001-2008. Now, Josie, if you and your colleagues feel that that activity is merged with manufacturing in some way, if it falls under the manufacturing process, that's fine. If you view it as part of a larger network of support processes, that's also fine. If you view it as a core process, a standalone core process, that's also fine. The fact that it appears in Section 7 is frankly immaterial to whether or not the item is to be considered core or support. That's something that is left at the discretion of the organization to make the official decision on. Tom Berenson asks, should the audit plan reflect the management review? Tom, in terms of putting an audit plan together, what we instruct our auditors to do is put your audit plan together based on the organization's processes. So if you get an interaction of processes document and it says, okay, there are 4 core processes and there are one of them is support processes, and that's kind of an all-inclusive that includes management review. I have instructed our auditors that I need to see support process called out in your audit plan, but if you want to further subdivide that and say, okay, support processes, but in this hour I'll be looking at management review, that's considered acceptable. Okay, Richard Liga, I do hope I'm pronouncing that right, When will we be required to meet ISO 9001-2015? The cutoff for transition is going to be in September of 2018. PJR's last offered transition audits will be May of 2018. Fred Evan asks, can the processes share AS9100C clauses, or must only one process own an entire clause? Great question. Absolutely, processes can share clauses. And I'll give you an example. You have a clause, like, for example, just to pull one from 9001-2008, 6.3, infrastructure. This is a clause that impacts, conceivably, the entire quality management system. You can absolutely rationalize that clause 6.3 is going to affect everything. So accordingly, by that logic, you should proceed with an open mind on what clauses are going to impact which areas. And again, the emphasis here is audit the organization's processes and make sure that the entirety of the standard, the applicable clauses of the standard, have been implemented by way of these processes. Okay, I'm going to make an attempt here. Brundaban Patra, and I do hope I've pronounced that correctly. As an auditor, what are the documents required from the auditee? Well, in terms of identifying the processes, we require an interaction of processes document. PJR has determined that that's equally applicable under ISO 9001-2008 and ISO 9001-2015. Now, how the organization chooses to render that interaction of processes, as we've shown here in our presentation today, is completely at their discretion. Tom Berenson with a nice compliment. You're quite welcome. I'm glad you found the webinar helpful. Are there any further questions that I can answer today? Well, I would like to wish all of you the very best for your day. Thank you for your attention. Have a good one.